No problem. All right, no problem at all.
All right.
Okay. Yes.
Action.
Okay, you are live. So, tell me about your course and why you decided to incorporate a service learning assignment.
You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm teaching a course on the sociology of American immigration. We've got three kind of components to the course. The first is an overview of important immigration legislation and theory. The second component looks specifically at Central and South American immigration to the U.S. And the third component looks at Asian immigration to the U.S. And I decided to incorporate a service learning component because the Bay Area has such a rich diversity. Many of Bay Area residents are immigrants, and so I was able to locate a couple of high schools that serve immigrant youth, and I thought I could do a service learning component to connect the immigrant youth in these high schools with my students and have an interchange where my students are learning about their immigrant experience and they could learn about college experience.
So you actually found two high schools that serve only immigrant youth.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. How about you, Andrew?
So the course I'm teaching this quarter is Language and Culture. It's an introductory course for both majors and non-majors. So we talk about different approaches to the study of language and culture and how they help us understand and avoid intercultural miscommunication. And also discuss the topics that are related to diversity and social justice, like bilingual education, gender miscommunication, and the English-only movement. So students acquire knowledge of diversity and intercultural understanding already, but I want to give them an opportunity to apply this knowledge to real-world situations. So that's why I decided to offer a service learning option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, can you go ahead and tell us specifically about your service learning option?
So students are required to do 10 hours of volunteer service. They can select the organization where they want to do this service placement. So I gave them a list, and most of my students are volunteering at Reading Partners, which is a literacy program for after-school literacy program, I think. And also at the American Language Program, which is a conversation partner program at the university.
Okay. So Reading Partners is off campus, but in Hayward?
In Hayward, actually all over the Bay Area.
All over the
So
Bay
I
Area.
have students who are volunteering in San Andrew, I think.
San Leandro.
Yeah, so East Bay.
Okay. And the American Language Program is right here on campus?
Right here on campus, yeah.
Okay. Right, Duke, what about the specifics of your service learning project?
Sure. I brought 65 recent immigrant high school students from their high school in Oakland to the CSU East Bay campus for a day. And the students took a tour of campus, met with enrollment services, they had lunch on campus, and then met with my students. And after some introductions, my students escorted the high school students to a class on campus. So they were spread out all over campus. They went to classes in every college, many departments, and the high school students got to experience firsthand what was a college classroom like. When the class was over, my students took their student mentees to a quiet place on campus and then conducted a qualitative interview about the high school students' immigrant experience. And then we wrapped up the day, met everyone back together, did a kind of closure activity that allowed people to reflect on the day. And my hope is the high school students have a better idea of college and may apply to college, if not at CSU East Bay, to somewhere. And my college students then use their interviews to write ethnographic papers about the immigration experience.
Wow, that's amazing. What was involved logistically to bring 65 high school students to campus from Oakland, which is about, I don't know, close to 15 miles away or so? Uh-huh.
Yes. So it turns out The Oakland School District doesn't have buses.
No surprise.
There are no school buses. So they were able to get BART passes. So the high schoolers took BART, the Bay Area Rapid Transit, to Hayward, which gets them close to campus but doesn't get them up the hill to the East Bay campus. And so I had to hire a shuttle bus that shuttled the students from the Hayward BART station to campus. And then, so there were logistics in getting the funds for the bus and getting the bus approved. And then you have to make sure it's the right kind of bus that state laws allow high school students to travel on. There were other requirements through CSU risk management department. I got fingerprinted and background checked since I was working with minors to make sure that I didn't have, that I could legally work with minors. Then there were logistics in working with the teachers and planning the schedule and getting a day that was mutually beneficial for their school and for my class. Logistics in getting lunch, and getting we had to reserve rooms on campus. Oh, and one big logistic was contact. So I contacted every professor on campus who taught between 12 and 2 on that day, and reached out to each of them, hoping that they would allow 4 to 6 guests to sit in on their classes. Fortunately, the faculty at CSU East Bay was very open, and I had more professors respond positively saying, yes, I'd love to have these students visit my class than I needed. And so my students got to spread out all over campus.
That's great.
Wonderful.
Classes.
So what about the logistics for you, working mostly with 2 organizations, one off campus in the adjacent city of San Leandro, the other one right on campus, the American Language Program?
Well, I think the Reading Partners is great. I mean, it's a very good organization, and all my students are very happy with the service learning experiences. With the American Language Program, I think it's very important to contact people in those organizations first, because we only have 10 weeks, and they're supposed to do 10 hours of volunteer service. So students need to know where they're going to volunteer, probably by week 2 or 3, right? So I think it's very important to know the contact person in each organization. And with the American Language Program, the problem is that, so the participation, so for students in that program, participation is only optional. So sometimes they're very flaky. And so I have 4 students who are volunteering there, and 2 students complained that their partners were very flaky. So that's something that we need to probably talk to the American Language Program about.
But then at the same time, I mean, that's what happens in life. I think that's part of the risk that you take when you decide to incorporate a service learning project is you as the faculty member lose a considerable amount of control over what's going to happen in your course.
Yeah.
And
I think it'd be better if they had 2 conversation partners instead of 1.
okay.
So if, one decides not to show up, at least you have someone else that you can,
Exactly.
work with, I think.
So sort of pairing up rather than the one-on-one.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good idea that could take care of the problem.
And so it's I should probably talk to Cheryl about this. Cheryl is the coordinator there. And, because I'm going to do the same thing next quarter. So.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so you have a chance to refine and revise a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, it's convenience for students who don't want to go off campus, but at the same time, I mean, they need 10 hours, and sometimes their partners don't show up, and so they don't really have a backup plan. So
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and it is stressful for students, but again, they need to be very resourceful and figure out, what to do next, or be very proactive. And I think that's something that if they're not accustomed to service learning, they're just accustomed to a more, passive kind of learning environment.
And Reading Partners is easy because they have a classroom and the kids there. So every time they go to the school, I mean, so there are always kids there. So
Right.
So they don't have to worry that the TT is not showing up, right? So
Right, so that's definitely, but you know, I think it's good how it worked out for your project because having a place on campus means it's highly accessible for a lot of the students who live on campus and don't have easy transportation to off-site places. So did you start investigating for your service learning project with the Office of Community-Based Learning here on campus?
Yeah, so I taught the service learning course before. I'm familiar with so I talked to Mary before.
Mm-hmm.
I started doing this this quarter. So.
Okay, yeah, so you're a seasoned service learning person.
I went and taught a service learning course once. So.
Okay.
This is my second time.
Okay, all right, very good. Okay. So if you could each talk a little bit about the demographic profile of the students in each of your courses this term, and in what ways your students' characteristics provided benefits to the assignment's success, and then in what ways they might have presented some challenges. Do you want to start, Duke?
Sure. So I'm teaching a class on immigration, and I have 24 students, and I think four or five of my students have volunteered that they are 1.5 generation, that they immigrated to the United States as youth. Another one of those actually immigrated to the United States when she was 19, so she's hasn't, and she's in her mid-20s, I would guess. So she hasn't been here that long.
Mm.
So I have students in my class who can contribute to this idea of immigration and having been recent immigrants themselves, and can speak to that. Racially speaking, it's a very diverse class with good representations from many racial groups, and that contributes to the class learning. For the service learning project, it also meant that some of the students had requested. I have a student, for example, who speaks Vietnamese, and she said if any of the students coming from Oakland International High School speak Vietnamese, I'd like to take them with me, and we can do part of the day in Vietnamese. And so I had students, when they did the qualitative interviews, they were doing the interviews in their native language as opposed to English, and I think that helped communicate a lot of the ideas really well during the interview process. In addition, I think having a diverse group of students, racially speaking, helped because I was able to, through connections with my students, I had guest speakers come speak to the class. For example, I have a Latino student who, when we were talking about border issues on the U.S.-Mexico border, he volunteered that his brother had been a Border Patrol agent, and his brother had another friend who was a Border Patrol agent, and so one day we had two guest speakers via Skype, who were both Border Patrol agents, talk to us about their perspective of working on the border. Which was then, to give another perspective, before the Border Patrol agents came, I had volunteers from an organization called No More Deaths come and talk about their experience providing human, critical aid to migrants who were crossing through the Sonora Desert. So you got two very different perspectives of U.S. citizens who do work on the border from very different angles. And because of the diversity of my classroom and the diversity on CSU East Bay, I was able to make connections there. I had another student who came to me and said, the book we're reading these last few weeks of the course, my neighbor's a good friend with the author, Helen Zia. Can I ask her if she wants to come talk to our class? And she's coming to our class. Speak to our class, and so the students in my class are a rich source of information and networking, and they have contributed quite a bit to the class. It's great.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Having such a diversity of students here at East Bay, you really do find these very interesting convergences, and just what happened in your class is a great example of, I think, you modeling this openness with diversity and social justice and service learning that students felt energized to volunteer and offer parts of their lives that just enrich the entire class. Are there any characteristics of students, you mentioned the bilingualism, for example, maybe less fluency in the English language that might have detracted from the success of the course overall?
I haven't noticed that. I haven't noticed that challenge. I think in terms of perhaps the diversity in terms of like immigrants and non-immigrants will contribute to it, but CSU, we also serve a lot of working class students who have come from high schools, I believe, that haven't prepared them that well in terms of writing at a college level. And so I do notice some of my students struggling with writing. Some of them who are native English speakers are struggling with writing, and others who are not native English speakers are struggling with writing. And so that does present a challenge, but it's an opportunity to teach as well. So
Right. I know you offer weekly assignments. Do you want to talk a little bit about those in your
Sure.
this course? Yeah.
Sure. I do require my students to do a considerable amount of writing. In fact, it's not weekly, it's every class period.
Okay. I know you're very busy grading all the time.
I grade all of it.
Yes.
I have my students submit a daily reading journal, which is, let's say I assign 2 chapters to read for class. They need to write 2 paragraphs, and I put a word limit on it, in part to force them to focus on what they're writing and really get at the core content, but also as a technique to reduce the amount of grading. And so if there are 2 chapters due, I'd ask them to write 100 words or less about the first chapter, 100 words or less summarizing the second chapter, and then finally a personal reflection that says, tie these 2 chapters to each other, to the other readings in the course, to your own life. And they write a 100 words or less personal reflection. And I find it does several things. It gives students lots of practice writing. It helps ensure that they're doing the reading and staying up with the course content. And it provides me with daily feedback of what are students understanding, what are they struggling with, where do I need to focus. Class time, if there's something that they've read and it seems like everybody got it, then I can focus class time on something else.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How do you grade these assignments? So you have basically 2 assignments every week, right?
2 assignments every week. I should say we haven't talked about the student assistants, and my student assistant, Meliana, has been incredibly helpful. She's been grading the assignments for this class, although I don't normally have that, and this is an assignment I use in other classes as well. And I do what I call pop grading. So they're in the situation I described, where I have to assign 2 chapters, they would have 2 summaries and 1 reflection. And when I receive these assignments, I will grade one or the other summary. They don't know which one I'm going to grade. And then I read everybody's reflection, because I get a lot of information about the students from the reflections. So for each student, I read a total of 200 words. And I have a pretty strict rubric. There are only 5 different points that they could, either they get these 5 points or not. So it's a simple rubric it's a pretty strict rubric. After the first couple of weeks, the students learn the assignment and spend a lot of time nitpicking. And so I can grade one assignment very quickly. An entire class to grade the assignments and input the grades in the grade book will take about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know that you use all kinds of writing assignments in your course also, Andrew, which this term is a hybrid course, and you use blogs and so forth and so on. So why don't you just expand on those, and then we'll go back to the original question.
Sure. So instead of doing service learning, they can choose the block option instead. And so for the block, they need to post one entry on Blackboard per week. But the blocks are only evaluated twice. So I evaluated blocks after week 4 and then again after week 8. So I don't know. I mean, I don't. You know, they have some pretty strict grading criteria. But so I do read all the entries. I comment on at least one per person each
so
time.
Similar.
So I mean, because otherwise there'd be a lot of grading information.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Well, it's important that you really, what you're trying to balance here, which you've successfully accomplished, is to have the students practice their writing consistently over the course of the quarter, but at the same time make it sane for you. So you've both successfully incorporated that.
Yes, so what I asked them to do in the blog is so every week they have to explain one thing that they find interesting. So it can be a concept that we covered in class or something that they read about, right? And something that it's just something that we talked about in class, and then they have to apply that to their everyday life. So I'm more interested in application of things that they have learned.
Yes.
So that's the main purpose of the blog, I think.
Right. Is there an exemplary example that you can share with us? Like a specific concept that a student really took off with, or?
Cultural norms of communication. So, for example, we talked about, so in this country, right, in this culture, if someone right next to you sneezes, you're supposed to say bless you, right? That's a polite thing to do. But then we don't realize that in other cultures, people don't do that. And so we're not aware of the rules of speaking in different cultures. So I think students were very excited about this topic, and they talked about that in the blogs.
Okay, great. All right, so Andrew, in your course, the demographic profile of your students and in what ways these characteristics might have contributed to your service learning success, and in what ways the characteristics might have presented challenges.
I have a very diverse group of students. So as far as service learning is concerned, I have 3 Latino students who are volunteering at Reading Partners. And they feel like they're giving back to the community because they tutor Spanish-speaking children. So they teach them how to read and write. And also I have 2 students who are volunteering at the elementary school. And they both want to be teachers in the future. So they're glad to have the opportunity to do something that's related to the future career goals. So in terms of challenges, so I have a student who is volunteering at the American language program. So she just came back from Afghanistan. So she was in the military, and she was paired up with someone from Saudi Arabia. So this woman from Saudi Arabia. So it was okay at the beginning. It seems like that. So the student, the woman from Saudi Arabia was very enthusiastic about the program. But then after 2 weeks, for some reason, she decided not to talk to my student anymore. So I don't know what the reason was, but my student was thinking, well, I don't know if it has to do with the fact that I was in the military before, because they kept asking me all these questions about what I did there. So that was,
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So that's where the diversity of the student body might lead to some very challenging political or personal or emotional issues.
Right, so I told her, well, maybe you should think of this as a learning experience, so what do you really learn from this, right? But it's difficult, right? So who knows why the student decided not to talk to her anymore, but
Fascinating. So Duke, in what ways did the service learning assignment fulfill your expectations, fall short, and how might you revise it in the future?
I think it was a rich experience for both my students and the high school students, and I did in the class period following the day that the high school was visited. I did a bunch of feedback with my students, and they were very enthusiastic about the project and really enjoyed it. And then I went to the high school and spoke with the high schoolers and asked, what was your experience and what was the teacher's experience? And so I got feedback from both sides. And I think all around, overall, it was a very good experience. What I learned, what I would do differently, I think I would shorten the day a little bit and take out the campus tour that was provided by the Welcome Center. I think the high school students got much more out of their one-on-one campus tours with my students, rather than the more generic one. And that would also give the high schoolers a shorter day. One of the things I didn't realize until the high schoolers was here is that I had set an itinerary that lasted until 4 in the afternoon, and they still had another hour to get home. And I wasn't thinking that normally the high school students get out of school at 3. And so they were, the teachers hadn't communicated with them that they were staying until 4. And so some of the high school students were like, I have other responsibilities, after school job, or taking care of younger siblings, or other obligations. And so better communication with the high school about the timing and let the high school students get out of here sooner so they can, the day would more match their time frame from a normal school day.
So it almost sounds like they should be leaving the Hayward campus at 2 in order to get back to Oakland and be ready to leave their high school campus at 3?
Right.
Moving it up considerably then.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Which would be 2 hours shorter.
Yes.
And so I know
Yes.
one thing, 1 hour out of the day that I would remove is the campus tour. Where that other hour would come from, I don't know. Because with the travel time and everything, the high school students met at BART in Oakland. They didn't go to the high school to save time.
Wow.
And they met at BART at the time that they normally would have met at the high school. And so I can't get the students to the CSU campus.
You can't
really
shave
sooner.
you can't shave anything off.
Off the beginning.
Yeah, there, yeah. Okay. Andrew, how the assignment fulfilled your expectations, fell short, and how you might revise it?
In terms of the assignments, so they are required to do 3 assignments. So there's a pre-service reflection. So basically they talk about the service placement, the organization, and the people that organization serves. And then there's a during service reflection. So they talk about the problems that CTs have with standard American English. And then there's a post-service reflection. So they discuss how they use linguistic anthropology at the service placement and how the organization can benefit from someone with knowledge in this area. So all these assignments are meant to help them prepare for the final in-class presentations. I think they're working pretty well so far, but so they're presenting this week, so let's see.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be determined on that.
So I think the assignment's okay. It's just that, what would I do differently? Probably better coordination with the American language program. And reading partners is fine, just because it's such a big organization. But American language program, because as I said, sometimes students don't show up, and so if we have better coordination, maybe each student would get 2 students. So that may work better, I think. So
Meet in groups rather than the one-on-one. Right.
But at the end, I think it's difficult because this is only optional for students in the program. So if they don't show up, this
It's right. In the American language program, it's optional. Correct. Correct. Yeah. So, also, what I hear you saying is, in your experience this term. It was almost like a natural experiment. The American Language Program, which is not set up per se, where the ALP students don't have any commitment, don't have any requirement, okay? As opposed to a program like Reading Partners that is completely set up, where the mentees will be there as scheduled every time your students go there. So yeah, those are sort of the pros and cons, or pluses and minuses, about going with a big existing multi-site program. Right. Yeah. Okay, so the final question: if you had more resources, what would you have done differently, and how would the students' learning objectives have been enhanced? And I want you to think really big about this question, not just that you would have necessarily chosen Oakland International High School, but that you might have chosen something else. Or the same for you, Andrew. You might have chosen, some ideal site that is very difficult to get to, but would be easy if you had resources of some sort. So, do you want to start, Duke?
Sure. If I had, the resources that we have for the project were well used and very much appreciated. I mentioned that I rented a bus and shuttled students from the Hayward BART.
And how much did that cost?
It was $380.
$380 for 65 students.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I had unlimited funds, I'd rent a bus that could pick them up at their high school and drive them directly to campus, and cut out the public transportation portion of the trip, just so that the total travel time was reduced, and that would give the high school students more time on campus. So the ability to rent a bus that could go all the way to Oakland. The difference in price, the shuttle from Hayward BART to the CSU campus was $380. To get the students all the way from Oakland to CSU campus was $1,500.
That would be round trip, the 1,500? Okay.
$1,500
for round trip. Yeah.
Another thing, if I had more funds, I would offer an honorarium to all of the guest speakers, the No More Deaths guest speakers, the Border Patrol agents, and Helen Zia, the author that's coming. To offer them a small honorarium for their time, because a lot of them were just volunteering their time. And I think there were other resources that we really appreciated. Meliana, the student assistant, and I were able to purchase a copy of all the books for the class for our use. I got a copy that I could put in the library on reserve. So those funds were appreciated.
What about the high school students? Did they bring their own lunches when they came to campus, or how did they have lunch? How did that end up?
The students brought their cafeteria packed sack lunches.
Okay.
And brought lunch with them.
Okay.
If we were talking unlimited funds, I would let them all eat lunch at our dining commons and see what they might be able to eat here. It was great that they could bring their sack lunches, but a lot of the high school students weren't actually very happy with
Oh, that's too bad. Yeah, especially when here we have all these fast food, Panda Express, etc.
Well, I'll tell you that
yes,
a lot of the qualitative interviews
uh-huh.
happened in the student union, so that the high school students could use their own money and go purchase Panda Express and Taco Bell.
Oh, interesting. And they enjoyed doing that.
They did, and
Yeah.
I think that ended up being a good experience for them as well to see, for a high school student to see the choice.
The choices, right?
Costume.
Oh, it's true. It's all true. And that there are pool tables and ping pong
Right.
tables. I remember when my kids were young, bringing them in their friends.
Well, you mentioned that, and one of the fun portions of the day was that we had some downtime, and we used pool tables and ping pong
Yes.
tables, and I had the opportunity to teach some international students how to play pool, and they'd never seen a pool table before.
Exactly. Oh, exactly. It's great. And I don't know if they saw the Raw Center or the pool or things like that. So my question to you, Duke, is how do you think your CSU East Bay students would benefit if you could rent a bus and take them all to Oakland International High School? You said that you went to the debriefing, you made a point of going there yourself, but what would it be like for your students, maybe in the last week of class or something, to all go and see the site where these recently immigrated students are obtaining their high school degrees and meet with them a second time, but at their site?
I think that would be very beneficial. One of my hesitations was imposing too much time restriction on the CSU students who are working jobs and have family responsibilities, and so a lot of their time is already called for. And I know that I can get them for the 2 hours that they've registered for my class.
Right.
And I convinced them to take a whole day, 1 day per quarter, to spend with me. I may be able to, but I wonder how much could I take 2 days out of their busy schedules to spend all day with me. 1 day on CSU campus and 1 day on the Oakland campus. And maybe it's possible. I don't know, but I also want to respect the students' needs.
So it sounds like what you're saying is part of the demographic profile of our students here is that they don't just go to school. They have their own families, or they have family obligations to take immigrant parents to doctors, or call up PG&E to talk about the electric bill, or they themselves work a great number of hours. And I think that that's something that we always think about at a different university, where our students were really more free and easy full-time college students. We could arrange for all kinds of things outside of class, but we can't make that assumption at all with our students. And the just thing to do is exactly what you did, but we're constrained by it to only schedule what is required of this service learning project during your class hours. Because you can never guarantee that all your students will be able to make it outside of class time, and therefore that would not be fair to those students who couldn't. And so I think that's a really important message that I'm hearing from you about the logistics, kind of. So
anecdotally, to speak to how busy my students are, I had one student from my class email me and ask. She said, I'm in charge of providing care to my younger brother who's 8, and there's no one that can take care of him during class today. Can I bring him to class? And I said yes, and he was actually a joy to have in the class. He raised his hand and participated in the discussion.
Yes, that is not uncommon.
Yeah.
That's not uncommon. And she was committed enough and felt that licensed enough to ask you that, right? Right. Whereas maybe in another professor she wouldn't have, and she would have just missed class.
Perhaps.
Yeah. Okay, so Andrew, if you had more resources, what would you have done differently on your service learning project, and how would the students' learning objectives have been enhanced?
That's a good question. Well, I think I have I mean, for my service learning project, I don't think I need a lot of resources per se. The only thing I can think of is, I mean, maybe I can give some of the students who volunteer at the American language program, some money to cover the expenses because usually they have coffee, and maybe that would give students in the American language program more incentive to participate.
That's a
I
great
think it's tricky though, right?
idea. Well, that's
Yeah,
a good idea. Uh-huh. Yeah,
so
so
I think that, yeah.
I think that's a wonderful idea. Okay, good. Like a free lunch.
Free lunch, the students tend to show up when they know it's this.
Exactly,
So, yeah.
exactly. And that's fairly simple, straightforward. Anything else you'd like to add at this point?
We've covered everything.
I will add that
Yeah.
having a student assistant was very nice for this
Mhm.
course.
Yeah.
Meliana did some background research and she led a lecture one day and then led an activity on another day and helped grade papers, and so she was a real asset to the course.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah. So, and well, that, that line, we're a little over time, so can you wait? Can you stay for? Okay. How are you going to be able to sustain this type of service learning project after the Peel grant? Have you thought about that?
well, so I'm applying for enhanced course learning grants. While having the student assistant is very good, I could do my job and what she's doing. It would be extra work, but I could do that without additional funds. I still need those funds to rent the bus and get the students to
Right.
campus, and so I'm hoping to look for other funding sources. I'll need funds for guest speaker honorariums, those type of things.
Mm-hmm. So what I hear you saying is, in order to sustain the success of this course, you're going to now need to apply to all these other little programs to pull it together for next term, so, or future quarters. Enhanced learning, the research assistant fund,
Yes.
and so forth and so on.
Yes,
Yeah.
the research assistant fund is
Yeah.
also a fund that I'm tapping into.
Yeah. How about you, Andrew? I know you did this as an option. Are you thinking of expanding it to a full requirement for all the students, and why?
I think I'm going to keep it as an option because some students just don't want to do service learning, right? So it's a good idea to give them something, two different options, and they can do the blog and the term project or service learning.
Okay.
And the other thing that I think we have to worry about, I don't know if we should say this, enrollments, right? Because sometimes students don't want to take classes that involve service learning. So, and I need students from other departments. Lots of them are taking this class for the area, I think D4.
Okay, social science, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So that has been your experience. Some students do not like service learning. Is it because their schedules are so packed?
Yeah, so we have to take that into account because
Yeah.
lots of our students have to work as well. So even though it's a hybrid course, so they just have to volunteer basically once a week, maybe 1 hour per week. Still, they think it's a lot, right? So.
Well, it is a lot
Yeah.
for some students because they've told me what their schedules are. And so that's a very important point. Yeah, you feel you're balancing a lot of things, and that if you feel in your particular specific class, if you were to require service learning, it would adversely affect your enrollment.
Right, yeah.
Yes, okay, that's important. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. 2:18.